It is June 24th, 2025, and I'm recording this at about 9:45 a.m. local time here in Texas as we have President Trump officially declaring that the ceasefire between Israel and Iran is now in effect. How long is this going to last given how crazy and chaotic the last few hours have been? Truth is, we don't know. So I'm bringing you the news as it stands right now. I will bring you updates later if anything changes. But of course, we have to question how we got to this point, right? What this means for this ongoing conflict and whether it was smart for Iran to agree to a ceasefire agreement with Israel in the sense that they are agreeing to end their retaliatory attacks as long as Israel does not continue on its attacks. What does it mean for the ongoing conflict, and what should we be concerned about moving forward? We got into all of the latest with a special guest earlier, so let's take a listen to that conversation now. Joining me now to discuss is Ehsan Safarnejad, an Iran-based geopolitical analyst and host of Political Aficionado. Ehsan, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
Thank you for inviting me.
Now, I want to get into the latest here, as I know that it has been just chaos for the last few hours. You had US President Trump declaring that there was a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. A lot of questions about whether that was actually the case. And the message from Iran seems to be that their retaliation would come to an end as long as Israel did not continue its attacks. Yet Israel has already violated this apparent agreement. So, what do you make of this back and forth? Is a ceasefire even possible right now?
Well, honestly, the way that I see it is Iranians being sandwiched between the naivety of certain politicians inside Iran and wickedness of the United States politicians. As you mentioned just now, uh, roughly 3 hours ago, Israel carried out an attack that took out the Iranian radar system near Tehran. 2 hours ago, they attacked the city of Bab el-Sab, which is completely normal considering the rap sheet of the Zionist entity. Throughout its history, it has always carried out attacks after ceasefires, violated every ceasefire that it has ever signed. So it's nothing out of the ordinary. But what really sort of terrifies me was the fact that the Iranian leader, the Iranian supreme leader, he warned about imposed peace on the Iranians. Roughly 2 days ago, a former IRGC general in an interview said that the people who were saying that if we negotiate, there will be no war, are now running around and saying that if we sign a ceasefire, then the war will end, which is really, really naive. And there is this sort of history and modus operandi of Donald Trump that really scares me. Let's look at what he does. He actually uses diplomacy in order to lull its enemy to a false sense of security and then carry out a decisive blow to them, which is perfidy. It's a war crime under the international law. Let me give you some examples. January 2020, General Soleimani was on a diplomatic mission to broker rapprochements between Iran and Kingdom of Saudi when Donald J. Trump assassinated him. So that was one example. Another example was very recently when Israel attacked Iran on 13th of June, 2 days prior to the meeting which was set between Iran and United States. Iran was negotiating when Israel started attacking the country. And obviously, everyone has seen that interview in which Trump brags about how he gave a 60-day ultimatum to the Iranians, and on the 61st day, this attack was carried out. And he again bragged about how the people whom he was negotiating with are no longer alive. They're dead. So this is completely the way that he actually acts. And we know from multiple sources that he knew prior to Israeli attack on Iran that this is going to happen. But yet he chose to, again, lull Iran into a false sense of security by these promises of negotiation. And that didn't end there. As crazy as it seems, even during the war, when Iran was under the attack, there was a talk between the Iranian foreign minister, the Europeans, and United States. There was supposed to be a 2-week period opportunity for diplomacy when I mean, not out of nowhere, because we know Pete Hegseth said that this attack by United States was long in the making and it was planned long time before. But as these people were negotiating with United States and different parties, uh, United States carried out an attack on Iran. Very interesting sentence that the Iranian foreign minister said. He said, "We want to negotiate, but we do not know how we can trust United States anymore." Well, Your Excellency, I hope that you have gotten your answer. You can't, or you can. You can trust them that they would attack you when they say that they are going to negotiate with you. But somehow, despite everything that has happened, it seems that the lessons have not been learned. In Iran, there is a certain political party whose religion is just summarized in one sentence. Negotiation is be all and end all. And under such circumstance, again, but if you remember the quote that I just mentioned from the IRGC retired general, it seems that this ceasefire was sort of imposed on the Iranian armed forces, despite their what they wanted to see on the battlefield.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you bring that up because that was kind of my biggest question in watching all of this. Exactly as you noted there, Trump has made it clear time and time again during both his first term and his second in office that he cannot be trusted. And even with his string of social media posts in recent hours where he's saying, oh, Israel needs to stop the bombing, I'm like, I do not believe that there is any kind of magical break between Trump and Netanyahu or between Trump and Israel. It seems much more like he's trying to once again lure Iran into some kind of false sense of security. And when it does come to, Trump's motive in this, what does it tell us about the impact that this war is having on Israel and on the US for that matter, when you have Trump suddenly pushing so hard for the ceasefire and, even publicly saying he's not happy with Israel, even if we're a little bit cynical and don't necessarily believe everything that he's saying?
It wasn't suddenly. I mean, the answer is very simple. Everyone is fooled. Right at the beginning of the war that was imposed on Iran by Israel, the Israeli military commanders, high-ranking officials, said that this war is going to last for 2 weeks. What day we are at right now? 12 days. So, I mean, it is going precisely as planned. And I don't see, I mean, I'm not buying into these notions of good cop, bad cop. Seems like fifth grade psychological operations on different people. But there's a truth that even prior to this, they knew that they can't really sustain a long time warfare with Iran, which is the case. If you, like me, follow IOF account on X, you'll see them posting same footages under different captions. For example, if I remember correctly, it was, I think, on 16th of June that IOF account published a video claiming that it has targeted a missile launcher in Isfahan, central Iran. Literally the next day, they published the same video claiming that they have targeted Iranian military asset in western parts of Iran. Which one is it? And in fact, that wasn't an isolated incident because you can argue that mistakes will happen, as it has happened for me. Sometimes I have been quick to publish stories and I did not carry out the necessary fact checking. Mistakes happen. From the 25 videos that I used as my sample size, I found out that roughly around 9 or 10, I don't remember exactly, of those videos were reposted, meaning that only 15 attacks were actually carried out. And we're not even talking about the decoys that were targeted or the Iranian, for example, F-14s that were abandoned for a long time in certain air bases because of the fact that F-14 is an American only. I mean, it's not an American only system, but apart from the Iranian Air Forces, the only other actor that was using it was the United States Navy. So Iran had to, considering the fact that it was under sanctions, had to go and cannibalize these F-14s in order to repair and maintain other F-14s that it had. So they targeted decoys and F-14s that were already cannibalized. Of course, this doesn't mean that they haven't carried out substantial attacks on Iran. What I'm trying to say is to bring a little bit of sense of sanity into the conversation, that the mystification of the Israeli air forces is just a propaganda. And it's a propaganda that once you look at these examples, you start asking questions that I would say are very logical. Like, if your bombing campaign is going as smoothly and as swiftly as you claim, then why are you feeling the need to repost old footages or claim victory over destroying the abandoned F-14s or decoys inside Iran, which, I mean, at the end of the day, it shows you the desperation of the Israelis, but it's not the kind of desperation that stems from unpreparedness. They exactly knew that they are going to carry out the strikes for 2 weeks, and then they are going to ask for a ceasefire. They knew that Iran is an enemy that is big and they can't really fight it.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point there to kind of take into account, because I know that when Israel first carried out these initial attacks, it seemed like they were pushing for, this even wider war, but also interesting to take into account the timeline that they had in mind going into this, the fact that the US is on board. So when it comes to this desperation here, right? Obviously, yes, they have this timeline. I don't know. I look at Israel and I go, did they think that Iran was going to respond the way that it did, right? Did they think it was just going to fold or maybe have a one-off attack? But how did the Israelis find themselves in these circumstances despite being the ones to initiate this war? Was it really that they weren't prepared for how much of a response they received from Iran?
Well, in order for us to answer that question, we have to talk about the strategy and the tactics that they used in war. There's a very important interview given by the Israeli ambassador to United States, Yachiel Leiter, in which he states that once the dust settles, the people will find out about the surprises that Israel pulled off on Friday and Saturday, which makes the pager attack seem almost simple. Those are his words. What is he trying to say? What was the nature of the Israeli pager attack? Well, Israeli pager attack was an intelligence operation. It was not a military operation. He is accurately describing the events that happened on Friday and Saturday in Iran, which he's flexing about the Mossad's intelligence prowess rather than the mystification that is being pushed out there by the propaganda accounts and outlets about the invincibility of the Israeli air forces. let me go even into more details and explain as to why that is the case and what I exactly mean. Mossad, for a long time, for a considerable amount of time, was smuggling these anti-tank missiles into Iran through different means that they have. And once the attack started, once the operation started, Rising Lion, they call it, they started taking out the air defense systems using anti-tank missiles, meaning from the ground. Many of the air defense systems weren't targeted by the air force of the Israeli regime. That was a substantial blow that they were able to inflict upon Iran using the people who were colluding with their intelligence agency, Mossad. Another thing that they did was carrying out decapitation strikes. Obviously, in order for you to carry out targeted assassinations, you need accurate intel. So this was, again, the success by Mossad. But here's the problem. You can't win a war solely based on your leverage and your advantage in terms of in terms of intelligence operation. It's like a 90-pound person going and pick up a fight with a 250-pound individual. It's clear that no matter how many punches you get to surprise the other guy with, at the end of the day, once that period of dazed and confused is washed off, things are going to change. And this was basically what happened and why they were prepared for it. The Israelis used a military tactic that we call blitzkrieg or lightning warfare, meaning that the point of these attacks are to inflict a substantial damage to the enemy in order to surprise them, to bring them into a state of shock, and kind of dismantle the command center. Once you do that, you prevent them from regrouping and mobilizing further. This was exactly what Israel was trying to do. Their initial assessment was that Iran is going to be facing much more hardship than it did, because in less than 24 hours, the Iranian leader actually appointed the military commanders who were assassinated in the decapitation strikes, and the Iranian military also carried out a retaliatory strike of its own. So it was a remarkable thing that they did. But ultimately, it goes to show you the kind of a strategy that they had. They wished for something that they couldn't attain, and they were also ready for the worst case scenario, which is the current situation, that they would have to sign a ceasefire. The best case scenario was based on once they go and dismantle the command center, and once they deal those kind of damages to the air defense systems of Iran, the Air Force would come and bomb different areas indiscriminately. And one of the targets that they had was the Iranian state media. That many Iranians were watching that, and it would have been a huge blow if they would see that the Iranian state media has collapsed and everything. I mean, that would create a sort of notion that everything is over. Once that would happen, their plan would go to the second phase. The second phase was for people to come to the streets based on the proclamations that the IOF was putting out there in order to topple the government and enact a regime change. So while their plan didn't go, it's very hard to explain the extent of their success because people are very easy to get on the bandwagon of supporting the extreme ends of this spectrum, but they failed in certain areas. I think that they couldn't enact the second phase of their operations, and they were forced to accept the ceasefire. But ultimately, They were ready for it.
Okay, and that's an interesting way to kind of phrase it, and I appreciate you explaining that there because I know that there's a lot of discourse that's going on about this right now, right? Everyone kind of has an opinion on it, and so it's interesting to me to look at it from that perspective of, okay, Israel had broader plans, they had other things that they wanted to do, but you're right, when it came down to it, it seemed as though they had this push for regime change or that they thought that things were going to go accordingly. And a lot of that so far has really fallen apart. Now, when it comes to Iran's end, right, their willingness to put an end to their retaliatory attacks against Israel, therefore establishing a ceasefire if Israel does comply. Do you see that as a bad decision right now? And have they proven enough with their retaliation over the last 12 days in the fact that the Iranian government is still standing?
It's really tough to talk about this without sounding like John Bolton, the scum of the earth. But the fact is that we were just entering the phase in which Iran had the upper hand. You see Donald Trump posting a tweet, keep the oil prices down. What is the advantage that Iran has in this scenario? It's the ability to have a very huge impact on the oil market, which is very important for people like JD Vance in Trump's administration, right? So we were getting into the area that Iran had more to offer. The problem with the ceasefire, and the reason that I'm saying this, that Iran should have continued, is because of the fact that I know what the Israelis and United States and the NATO countries are going to pursue from now on. During the session that was held at United Nations Security Council, if you listen to the Secretary General of UN, Antonio Guterres, he first of all said that the world needs peace, but what we are seeing is the constant cycle of retaliation after retaliation, meaning that he didn't condemn the unprovoked attack of Israel or United States, but he managed to gaslight and shame Iran for using its right to retaliate under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. The second thing that he said was NPT is the cornerstone of the international law, and Iran should fully respect it. Similar words were said by the IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi. If you listen to the statements by Pete Hegseth and the Chief of Joint Staff in the United States Army, they said that the battle damage assessment is hard for them to do. One of the things that Director General of IAEA, Rafael Grossi, talked about is the need for the IAEA's inspector to go to Iran and carry out damage assessments, awfully coincidentally similar to one another. So why am I concerned about this? People might ask. Well, if you listen to the Foreign Relations Committee hearing, there is this representative Lawler that asked a question from Norman Raw, who was the National Intelligence Manager on Iran for CIA. The question is, what are the challenges that we are going to face if we are going to attack Iran? To which Mr. Norman Raw says, well, the fact that the IAEA inspectors have less access to Iran due to violation of, the deal between Iran and United States, we are not going to receive that data in order to understand where we should attack or, where the sensitive 60% enriched uranium are located. So the first thing that is going to happen is while Iran is under such ruthless attacks by United States and Israel, they're ganging up on Iran. These individual United Nations Security Council Secretary General Antonio Guterres and IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi are going to push for this. You can only imagine that after ceasefire, those pushes are going to become more and more, and the data that will be gathered by the IAEA inspectors are going to be used as the national intelligence manager of the CIA, said in calibrating the attacks against Iran. So that's the first problem that Iran has, that 60% enriched uranium creates a sort of semi-strategic ambiguity for Iran that plays as a sort of deterrence. So that's the first problem. The second problem is that Israel has the backing of the NATO collective. Iran is on its own. Their ability to replenish their stock of surface-to-air missiles or guided munitions, bunker busters, everything, their ability to replenish and recover is much, much, much greater than Iran. As if that's not bad enough, we already have videos being published by separatist group like PEJAK or PAK, and you can see them fully equipped with the American weaponry, in which they state that they are going to launch attacks on Iran. So while they are replenishing their stock, the separatists from western parts of Iran and eastern parts of Iran are going to engage with the security forces and degrade the ability of the Iranian armed forces in order to recover itself. And apart from this, we already know the modus operandi of the Israeli regime, which is to say that it supports the ceasefire, but then proceeding to violate it in every shape or form that it can, which is exactly what happened in Lebanon and Gaza. So I don't think that it is a bad decision to go for the ceasefire. I think that it is a moronic one.
All right. I see what you're saying in terms of everything that is coming together. And it's so interesting to me. The more I hear about the IAEA, the more I'm reminded of what a completely corrupt institution this is. And it plays right into the US and Israel, everything that they're doing to target Iran. And you have Iran in this place where it's like they want to follow international law, right? They want to go by the book and to do what is quote unquote viewed as right on the international stage. And yet we have the US in a position where it is doing everything that it can to target them. And now I also want to know, when it comes to the atmosphere inside Iran, what that has been like. Has there been more of a sense of unity as you very clearly have the US and Israel trying to sow chaos with these attacks? And has there been a push for a ceasefire in order to get the attacks to stop?
Well, I would say that the majority of the achievements that the Iranian establishment was able to accomplish was due to the support of people. Mossad had invested a lot of money, logistics on this operation. They had workshops inside Iran, and you could see the things that they were using in those workshops: CNC devices, 3D printers, the printed circuit boards, airframes of the missile, the drones, and then individuals who were clearly trained to create homemade explosive designs that have very high calorific value, which means that when they explode, they're going to release a lot of energy. So that's what they did. During the first days of the war, there were all these sort of trucks that were moving around. So the sunroof of these trucks would move, away, and the drones would be launched on the Iranian air defense systems, whose main target was, these air defense systems were tailored to intercept fighter jets, right? Not intercept small aerial vehicles that were launched from, a very close proximity of them. Each air defense system is tailored to do something very specific, and they were simply not specialized in that category. Iran has the systems that are able to do that. So this was what Mossad did. The way that Iran was able to thwart that attack, or maybe thwart would be too much of a generous word, but the way that Iran went on and neutralized it after the initial blow was through the help of people. It was something that I never saw in my entire life. Ordinary Iranians would surveil the areas and notify the authorities about suspicious trucks. And this played a huge part on, the ability of the intelligence community to arrest the colluders, the people who were colluding with Mossad. So when you talk about, the support of the Iranian people and the sense of unity, yes, absolutely. Another example of that was, as I mentioned earlier, the attack of the Israeli Air Forces on the Iran's state-owned media, where the anchor remained steadfast, against all odds, and what could have become a catastrophic moment. Just imagine sitting on your couch, looking at the television, the national television, and suddenly you see that the building collapses, or you see the empty chair of the anchor. What kind of a psychological effect it would have on you, and later on it would result in the rioters, the thugs would take into the streets and enact regime change. Instead of that, because of the display of courage by that anchor, you would see, for example, bakeries saying that in honor of this bravery that was displayed by this woman, we're going to give you all free bread. Any bread that you are charging today is going to be free of charge. Another point of concern during any war is about the hoarding of the necessary goods, which was something that didn't happen in Iran. People were just buying the basic necessities that they needed, refraining from hoarding stuff. Considering what I saw in Western civilized world with regards to COVID, how the different countries were stealing masks or different PPPs from one another, I would say that I'm very proud of my compatriots and what they did in order to fight against this onslaught on Iranian territories.
Yeah, and it's stories like that I've heard over and over again of the Iranian people coming together, supporting each other. And it's so interesting because that's the exact opposite of what the West is wanting to show and really what they're wanting to happen, right? They do not care about the people of Iran here in the US. The US government only cares about this push for quote unquote regime change. And even now with Trump's latest post, I certainly do not buy that he's pushing for any kind of peace. And so it's going to be interesting to see what does end up happening and where this goes. But I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today to discuss and to really educate us on all of the latest here. Ehsan Safarnejad, an Iran-based geopolitical analyst and host of Political Aficionado. Thank you so much for your time and insight.
Thanks for inviting me.
If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment. And as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos and new weekly episodes of my exclusive series for paid subscribers called Sanctioned. You can also find Sanctioned over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/RachelBlevins. As always, thank y'all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.